The turquoise water of the Maldives was the perfect backdrop for my new life, until my husband vanished, leaving behind only a coded message about a paramilitary group and a desperate plea to find a woman named Amelia Reyes. I traded my dream honeymoon for a desperate flight across Europe, only to discover my husband wasn't a fraudster, but a compromised deep-cover agent, and now I was the key player in a game involving a massive organized scheme. The turquoise water lapped gently against the overwater bungalow in the Maldives. The air smelled of salt and expensive sunscreen. This was it, the absolute pinnacle of my dreams. 2 weeks of pure, uninterrupted bliss with Michael, the man I'd loved since college, the man who, until yesterday, I thought I knew completely. We'd just finished a sunset dinner, the kind where the waiter whispers poetry as he pours the wine. I remember laughing, feeling this profound sense of completion. We were finally Mr. and Mrs. Harrison. Michael was a financial analyst, sharp, meticulous, and incredibly successful, or so I thought. He'd handled all the financial logistics for the wedding and this trip, which I'd happily let him do. He was the numbers guy. I was the creative director, happily dealing with aesthetics while he built our future. He'd assured me everything was locked down, investments solid, savings ample. We even had a small joint account just for emergencies, funded primarily by my inheritance, which he managed conservatively. He was always so cautious, so risk-averse when it came to our money. The trouble started subtly, like a tiny crack in polished marble. The morning of day 3, Michael was oddly agitated. He kept checking his phone, frowning at the screen, something he never did on vacation. When I tried to pull him outside to snorkel, he snapped, "Give me an hour, Sarah. I have to finalize something with the firm." "Michael, you don't work on your honeymoon," I chided gently, trying to keep the mood light. "This isn't work," he muttered, pulling on a crisp linen shirt that looked far too formal for our beachside villa. "It's a mandatory compliance review. Something came up with the offshore holdings. I need secure Wi-Fi and privacy." He looked pale. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look truly afraid of something related to his work. He took his laptop, which he'd sworn he was leaving behind, and retreated into the separate dressing room, locking the heavy wooden door. I tried not to pry, convincing myself that high finance never sleeps, even in paradise. I spent the morning alone, swimming until my skin wrinkled, trying to ignore the heavy silence emanating from behind the locked door. By lunchtime, he emerged, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The tan lines seemed to deepen the shadows under his eyes. "It's done," he sighed, collapsing onto the sun lounger next to me. He took a large gulp of water. "Everything is signed off. Back to vacation mode?" I tried to smile, but a cold knot had formed in my stomach. "What was it, really?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Complex tax stuff. Boring. You wouldn't want to know." For the rest of that afternoon, he was overly affectionate, almost desperately so. He swam with me for hours, held my hand constantly, and kept repeating how much he loved me. It felt like an apology, but I didn't know what he was apologizing for. That evening, he received an urgent encrypted message on his personal satellite phone, the one he always claimed was for emergencies only. His face went white, a startling contrast to his flushed vacation skin. "Sarah, listen to me," he said, his voice barely a whisper, pulling me into the dimly lit bathroom. "I have to go back to the city, tomorrow morning. First flight out." "Go back? Michael, our flight home isn't for 10 days. "I know, but there's been a massive, unexpected issue with the firm's overseas portfolio, a major liquidity crisis. I'm one of the key signatories. If I'm not there to stabilize things, we could lose everything." He made it sound noble, like he was riding in to save the day. I felt a rush of anxiety, but also a strange sense of reassurance. He was the responsible one. He had to go. "Okay," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "What about me?" "You stay here. Enjoy the rest of the trip. I'll book you on a direct flight back when the immediate dust settles. Maybe in 3 days. I've already wired extra funds to your emergency card. Consider it a hazard bonus." He packed 2 bags with frantic energy, leaving his golf clubs and beachwear untouched. As he hugged me goodbye at the resort reception desk at 5 a.m., his farewell was desperate. He kissed me hard, whispering, "Don't worry about a thing. I'll fix this, and we'll celebrate when I get back." He left in a private speedboat heading toward the main island where the private charters wait. I watched until the boat was just a distant speck on the impossibly blue horizon. I tried to resume my holiday. I ordered room service, read a book, went snorkeling again. But the absence of Michael, his routine, his energy, left a vacuum that paranoia eagerly filled. Something was wrong. His anxiety hadn't been about liquidity. It had been about flight. 3 days passed. I tried calling his office, his cell, his home line. All went straight to voicemail. I started emailing his partners, using the generic professional tone I'd learned from our brief engagement calls. No response. The resort staff became subtly evasive when I mentioned the name Harrison. On the morning of the 4th day, a Tuesday, I sat on the terrace watching the sun bleach the white sand when my laptop buzzed. It was an email notification, flagged urgent, personal account access required. It was from Michael's primary secure email, the one he used for investments. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting request, review of personal assets." My hands trembled as I opened it. The sender address was correct, but the tone was cold, bureaucratic. It wasn't from Michael. It directed me to a secure video conference link, scheduled for 1 hour from now, and listed 3 attendees: Counsel L. Vance, Director J. Sterling, and Mr. M. Harrison. I clicked the link exactly on time, expecting Michael to pop up, looking sheepish and ready to explain his mess. The screen flickered to life. I saw the mahogany paneling of a very serious boardroom. On the right side sat 2 stern-looking people in expensive suits, the counsel and the director. And in the center, looking utterly shattered, was Michael. He wasn't wearing linen. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting gray blazer, and his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't look at me. He stared at the polished table. Counsel Vance cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harrison, thank you for joining this emergency session. As you know, Mr. Harrison has been temporarily detained following irregularities discovered in his management of several substantial investment vehicles." My mind went blank. Detained? Irregularities? I managed to choke out. "What are you talking about? He's handling a liquidity issue." Director Sterling leaned forward, his voice clipped and devoid of sympathy. "Mrs. Harrison, your husband has not been dealing with a liquidity issue. He has been managing an elaborate credit disbursement scheme using phantom collateral and leveraging client trust funds. We believe he was preparing to flee the country permanently when he was intercepted." The heat drained from my face. The turquoise water outside seemed to turn to sludge. "You're mistaken," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "Michael is a legitimate analyst. He built his career on ethical investing." Michael finally looked up. His gaze was one of pure, agonizing defeat. "Sarah, he started, his voice cracking. Counsel Vance cut him off sharply. "Mr. Harrison, please remain silent. Mrs. Harrison, we need your cooperation. When you married Mr. Harrison, you signed a prenuptial agreement, which you may recall included stipulations regarding shared marital assets and any liability incurred prior to the marriage date." "Prior?" I asked, confused. "We consolidated everything after the wedding." "That is where the complications arise," Sterling continued, flipping open a file. "The evidence strongly suggests Mr. Harrison began establishing the network of shell corporations approximately 18 months before your wedding. However, approximately 6 months ago, Mr. Harrison began liquidating a significant portion of his personal liquid capital which, we have traced, was transferred into an account jointly held by you and Mr. Harrison, funded almost entirely by your inherited securities. Securities that are now missing." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of the accusation settle. "We have uncovered evidence suggesting that the final, massive transfer required to complete this complex operation, the one that triggered the internal audit, was made directly from your joint emergency account, which was overwhelmingly composed of your family's money. This was not a simple case of mismanagement, Mrs. Harrison. This is looking very much like money laundering facilitated through a domestic partnership. We have placed a temporary freeze on all your remaining assets, pending a full investigation into potential complicity in a major financial deception. A deception that carries the weight of a very serious nationwide accusation. Complicity. The word hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. I gripped the edge of my desk, staring at the two soulless faces and the broken man beside them. My dream honeymoon had curdled into a nightmare interview. Complicity? I repeated, the word tasting metallic on my tongue. I was on a beach. I managed a small budget for wedding favors. I didn't know anything about shell corporations or leveraging trust funds. Michael finally spoke, ignoring the counsel's sharp, warning glance. Sarah, please, listen to them. You have to listen. His voice was thick with tears, but there was a desperate urgency beneath the remorse that didn't sit right with the scenario. Director Sterling leaned closer to his camera. Mrs. Harrison, silence from you is the best course of action right now. We are not alleging you were an active participant, but when your marital estate becomes the conduit for an alleged scheme of this magnitude, the authorities will investigate every transaction made under your name. The initial charges are being drafted. The potential severity of the accusation being considered against Mr. Harrison involves serious economic penalties and a truly massive term of incarceration. I could feel the panic rising, hot and suffocating. My inheritance, my grandmother's legacy, had been funneled into this monstrous black hole. I thought of my parents, pillars of community stability, and the ruin that a serious nationwide accusation would bring upon them just by association. What do you want from me? I demanded, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor running through my entire body. I want to see the evidence that links me to this. I want a lawyer, not an in-house counsel review. Counsel Vance interjected smoothly. That is your right, Mrs. Harrison. But understand this. Mr. Harrison is currently cooperating in the hope of receiving leniency. He has offered full testimony in exchange for recommendations on sentencing, provided the investigating service can confirm that the bulk of the illicit funds were moved through your shared accounts without your explicit knowledge of their criminal origin. Your cooperation now, proving you were unaware, is crucial to reducing the scope of the charges against you. If you retain outside counsel immediately, that may be interpreted as obstruction. It was a threat wrapped in a silk glove. They wanted me to trust them, to give them unfettered access to my testimony while Michael sat there, a hostage bargaining chip. Michael, look at me, I commanded. He slowly raised his head. His eyes were hollow. Tell me right now, did you touch my inheritance money? Did you move it knowing what it was? He flinched, looking away toward the ceiling. I needed the initial liquidity, Sarah. It was the cleanest pool of capital. I was going to replace it tenfold before anyone noticed. I swear, it was supposed to be a temporary bridge. A bridge to where, Michael? To a prison cell? My anger was starting to burn away the shock. To freedom, he burst out, desperation making him careless. To getting us out of this mess with the Vector Group before they brought everything down on our heads. Vector Group. That name meant nothing to me, but it sounded vaguely European and profoundly dangerous. Director Sterling immediately tapped his microphone. Mr. Harrison, we agreed on the parameters of this discussion. Focus on the agreed-upon narrative. Michael seemed to realize instantly that he'd said too much. He slumped forward again, defeated. I seized the moment. The Vector Group? What is the Vector Group? Is this about that heavy charge they were talking about? The one involving the organized scheme? I used the carefully vague terminology I'd overheard Michael use in hushed calls months ago. Terminology that always made my skin crawl. Vance's composure finally cracked. He glanced sharply at Sterling, a look that screamed liability. Mrs. Harrison, this conversation is concluded. Vance declared, his voice suddenly steel. "You have been advised of the situation. We strongly recommend you retain local counsel and cease all digital communication pending further instruction. Your access to Mr. Harrison will be severely restricted until the service has completed its preliminary assessment of your financial trail." The screen went black, abruptly. I was left staring at my own reflection in the dark monitor, the tropical light outside seeming mocking and cruel. I stood up, pacing the villa, my mind racing at impossible speeds. Money laundering, complicity, Vector Group, massive term of incarceration. This wasn't a financial hiccup. This was organized crime territory. Michael hadn't just made a bad investment. He had tangled us in something truly predatory. And the key piece of evidence they needed to protect me, or condemn me, was the precise moment I realized what was happening. I ran to the small safe Michael insisted we keep our passports and emergency cash in. I opened it. The cash was there. Our passports were there. But tucked into the back corner, beneath my emergency gold jewelry, was a small, sealed manila envelope that I had never seen before. It was addressed to me in Michael's handwriting, simply marked, "If you open this, you are already too late." My heart hammered against my ribs. They had intercepted him. They had controlled the narrative. Was this envelope his final message? His confession? Or was it the key to understanding what the Vector Group actually was? Something far darker than complex financial fraud. The urge to tear it open was almost unbearable, but the chilling warning echoed in my ears. If you open this, you are already too late. I looked back toward the closed door of the dressing room where he'd worked in secret. If I opened this now, I might be alerting the authorities, or worse, the Vector Group, that I was actively investigating. But if I didn't open it, I was walking blindly into a situation where I could be charged with serious economic crimes based on my husband's lies. I held the envelope, the paper thin and fragile, knowing that my entire future hinged on whether I obeyed his final plea for caution or succumbed to the need for truth before the inevitable knock on the villa door. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hand, an anchor dragging me toward an uncertain depth. My first instinct, born of pure adrenaline-fueled survival, was to destroy it, to shred it, burn it, flush every last fiber down the villa's pristine plumbing. If the internal investigation was trying to gauge my level of awareness, ignorance was my only shield. But Michael's plea, "If you open this, you are already too late," was less a warning about legal danger and more a sound of absolute surrender. He didn't want me to cover for him. He wanted me to prepare. He had been intercepted. His cooperation with the investigating service was likely coerced or strategic. If I destroyed this evidence, I destroyed my only chance to understand the nature of the Vector Group and the full extent of the predicament he'd maneuvered me into. If this contained the real story, destroying it meant accepting the role of the unwitting accomplice they were currently trying to paint me as. I took a deep, shuddering breath and walked over to the small marble table, placing the envelope down as if it were radioactive. I needed a clean slate, a way to process information without Michael's desperate influence coloring my judgment. I grabbed my passport, a small wad of US dollars I'd kept hidden from the main travel fund, and my phone. I disabled Wi-Fi and cell signal capabilities. My decision was made in a rush of cold logic. I was leaving the resort. Now. I didn't bother with reception. I walked straight down to the jetty where Michael's speedboat had departed. The resort was quiet, still operating under the illusion of paradise. I flagged down a passing maintenance boat used for supply runs, offering the boatman triple the usual island-hopping fee just to take me to the nearest inhabited island with a functional civilian airport, not the private charter hub Michael had used. The boatman, a grizzled local named Ravi, looked at my designer resort wear and the panic in my eyes, shrugged, and took the cash. The 40-minute ride was agonizingly slow. Every white cap looked like the silhouette of an approaching security vessel. I kept turning my head, watching the receding silhouette of our luxury resort, imagining the stern faces of Vance and Sterling coordinating my capture, or worse, anticipating my flight. Once on the slightly larger island, I located a small, buzzing travel agency. I didn't use my credit cards. I paid cash for a ticket to the nearest major international hub, Singapore. I needed to get off the grid, to a place where the jurisdiction of Michael's firm, and potentially the federal agency that had intercepted him, was less immediate. By the time I landed in Singapore 3 flights later, nearly 30 hours had passed since the black screen ended the conference call. I checked into a nondescript business hotel, the kind where nobody asks questions. The first thing I did, once safe behind a locked door, was open the envelope. Inside, there wasn't a confession or a detailed map of offshore accounts. There were 3 things: a burner phone, a single, slightly crumpled photograph, and a handwritten note. The note was short, scrawled quickly in Michael's recognizable, tight script. Sarah, they are not the threat. They are the shield. Vector is real. The assets aren't stolen. They are protected. If you are reading this, it means the internal check found the trail leading to your account. Do not contact my partners. Find Amelia Reyes. She knows the parameters of the real danger. She has the key to the Vienna safety deposit box. Destroy this phone after reading. I love you. Forgive me. I stared at the photograph. It showed Michael, not in a suit but in fatigues, standing next to 2 other men who looked less like financiers and more like soldiers. They were standing in front of a rusted shipping container. The air in the photo looked dry and hot, entirely unlike the Maldives. And one of the men, standing closest to Michael, was holding not a briefcase, but a heavy object wrapped in canvas resembling, to my horror, illegal weaponry. This wasn't about accounting fraud. This was exponentially worse. The Vector Group wasn't just an organized scheme involving illegal money transfers. It was something paramilitary, something connected to violence or weapons, something Michael had kept hidden even from his secret life as a criminal financier. I looked at the burner phone. It was a cheap, disposable model. Michael had explicitly told me to destroy it after reading the note. But how could I find Amelia Reyes without a means of communication? And who were the men in the photograph? My gaze flickered to the burner phone again, and I noticed a single unsent text message already drafted in the composition field. It wasn't addressed to Amelia Reyes. It was addressed to a number I didn't recognize, and the message read, "Package secured. Confirming immediate extraction required. Protocol 7 initiated." Protocol 7. Extraction. Was I the package? Was this burner phone the trigger for a rescue operation or a distress signal to the very people who had intercepted Michael? If I pressed send, would Amelia Reyes arrive to save me? Or would the Vector Group descend upon the hotel, looking for the asset their captured operative had clearly planned to retrieve? The decision was paralyzing. Activate the unknown protocol, or risk finding my own way to this mysterious Amelia Reyes without a single clue about who she was or where Vienna was in relation to my current location. My thumb hovered inches above the send button on the burner phone. The air in the sterile Singapore hotel room felt pressurized, the silence amplifying the frantic beat of my pulse. Protocol 7 initiated. Michael hadn't just anticipated being caught, he had planned an escape route for me, or perhaps for whatever secret he was guarding. Sending that message meant trusting a plan coded by a man who had just lied about the entirety of our shared life. Ignoring it meant being defenseless. I couldn't risk contacting an unknown number linked to a desperate, prearranged extraction. If Vector was indeed the power behind the scenes, the paramilitary element suggested by that terrifying photograph, sending a coded signal meant handing myself directly to them. I deleted the unsent text message, the screen clearing instantly. Then, remembering Michael's final instruction, I powered the burner phone down and, with a sense of profound finality, snapped the plastic casing in half, dropping the pieces into the bathroom waste bin. One piece of the puzzle was gone. The note remained. Find Amelia Reyes. She has the key to the Vienna safety deposit box. Vienna. That was the only tangible lead. I needed to disappear from Singapore, which felt too exposed, too metropolitan. Vienna offered anonymity, history, and a reasonable distance from the immediate fallout of Michael's arrest. I spent the next hour frantically transferring the remaining cash, a surprisingly meager sum considering Michael's supposed wealth, onto a prepaid travel card, securing my passport and booking a direct one-way flight to Austria for later that evening. I left the hotel without checking out, slipping the key card under the door. The next 48 hours were a blur of transit anxiety. Every uniformed official, every sharp-eyed traveler in the airport lounges seemed to be looking for the freshly widowed, potentially complicit wife of a fugitive financier. I kept my head down, speaking only when necessary, using the calm, detached demeanor I employed when directing complex photo shoots. It was a performance, and the audience was the entire global security apparatus. When I finally landed in Vienna, the cold, solid reality of Central Europe felt like a temporary refuge. The air was crisp, the architecture imposing. I immediately rented a small, anonymous apartment outside the main tourist center, paying weekly in cash. The next order of business was finding Amelia Reyes. How do you locate a single person when your only connection is a name provided by a man who just admitted to massive fraud? I couldn't risk a broad internet search using my real name or Michael's. I resorted to the only resource I had left from Michael's legitimate professional life, the digital footprint he hadn't managed to erase. I found a list of his past professional conference attendances, scouring the attendee manifests for the name Reyes. After 2 full days of meticulous cross-referencing through old conference brochures and LinkedIn profiles that had since been scrubbed clean, I found her, Amelia Reyes, a former commodities broker specialized in emerging market assets, reportedly left the industry abruptly 5 years ago after a high-profile ethical disagreement with a major consortium, a consortium whose initials, I noted with a jolt, were eerily similar to the Vector Group's known shell company prefix. Her last known active professional address was tied to a small, private art consultancy firm in the Dobling district of Vienna. It wasn't a flashy office. It looked respectable, low-key, the kind of place you'd go to discreetly sell a valuable painting. It took me another day of surveillance to confirm her routine. Amelia Reyes was a creature of habit. Morning walk, 10 to 5 at the consultancy, quiet evenings. She was cautious, moving through the world with the practiced ease of someone looking over their shoulder. I decided on a direct approach. It was risky, but I was out of time and resources. I walked into the consultancy office on a gray Tuesday morning, clutching the photograph of Michael with the armed men. The receptionist directed me to a back office. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Amelia Reyes was older than I expected, sharp-featured, with eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. She was on the phone, speaking rapid German, her expression severe. She gestured for me to sit down, holding up one finger to indicate a moment's pause. She finished the call, slammed the receiver down, and finally looked at me, her gaze sweeping over my tired face and expensive but crumpled clothes. "You look like trouble walking into my office, Mrs. Harrison. How did you find me?" "Michael sent me," I said simply, sliding the photograph across the desk. Amelia's composure vanished. She snatched the photo, her breath hitching as she recognized the men. "Oh, Michael, you fool! You actually tried to sever the connection." She didn't look at me. She stared at the faces in the picture, her own fear palpable. "He told me to find you," I urged. "He said you have the key to the Vienna safety deposit box." Amelia looked up, her face hardening into something cold and decisive. "The box holds what Michael actually stole, Sarah, not the client funds. That was collateral to keep the wolves busy. The box holds the intel. And yes, I have the key, but you walked into the lion's den. You didn't destroy the burner phone, did you? You sent the signal. My blood ran cold again. I deleted the message. I broke the phone. Too late, she whispered, standing up and moving to the window, peering down at the street below. If Michael initiated Protocol 7, the Vector network knows exactly where their compromised operative spouse would go to find the only leverage they have left. They're not interested in the bank investigators anymore, Sarah. They're interested in containment. As if on cue, the sound of heavy tires screeching to a halt just outside the building echoed up to the second floor. Then came the heavy, unmistakable thud of boots on the stone steps outside the consultancy's main entrance. Amelia spun around, grabbing a slim, heavy briefcase hidden beneath her desk. The deposit box is on the other side of the city. We have exactly 60 seconds before they breach the reception area. Can you run, Sarah? Because if they catch us here, neither of us is walking away with a massive term of incarceration. We'll be facing something much more permanent. Amelia didn't wait for an answer. She smashed the window of her back office with the corner of the heavy briefcase, a briefcase I now realized was probably packed with far more than documents. Shards of glass rained onto the narrow ledge below. "Jump!" she commanded, swinging her leg over the sill with practiced grace. The drop wasn't lethal, but it was high enough to break an ankle if you misjudged the landing on the cobblestone alleyway. I looked down at the dark, shadowed passage, then back at the main door, where the muffled but increasingly insistent sound of breaking wood signaled the imminent arrival of the Vector operatives. There was no choice. Survival instinct, honed over years of navigating high-pressure corporate environments, kicked in. I scrambled onto the sill, the cold air hitting my exposed skin. Amelia was already gone, having landed softly on the alley floor. I jumped, landing awkwardly, feeling a sharp, searing pain shoot up my left leg, but I bit back the cry. "Move!" Amelia hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me into a run. We didn't head toward the main streets. We plunged deeper into the tangle of narrow Viennese alleyways, Amelia moving like a ghost, effortlessly navigating the labyrinth. The briefcase seemed to anchor her, giving her a steady momentum that belied the urgency. I hobbled, leaning heavily on her as we passed hidden courtyards and echoing archways. "Who are those men?" I gasped out, trying to keep pace despite my throbbing ankle. "Paramilitary contractors hired by Vector when their direct financial fraud gets too hot," Amelia panted, not breaking stride. "They clean up loose ends. Michael didn't steal client money, Sarah. He stole the ledger, the proof linking high-ranking officials in half a dozen EU governments to Vector's weapons sales. The firm that detained him? They're the lesser evil, the compliance division, trying to mitigate the fallout and offer Michael up as a scapegoat. Vector wants the ledger before the investigators can trace it. And the safety deposit box? The key Michael gave me opens the box containing the hard drive, the true ledger. Michael didn't try to run with cash. He tried to hide the evidence that would dismantle the entire Vector apparatus. We burst out onto a quiet tramline street, Amelia pulling me toward a nondescript repair van parked illegally by a flower stall. The operatives were clearly behind us. I could hear shouts echoing down the passage we'd just exited. Amelia produced a second key, a standard electronic fob, and opened the van's passenger side. Inside, instead of tools, were 2 high-end backpacks and a pair of dark, unassuming jackets. Change, now. We swapped our clothes, the urgency lending a strange, detached efficiency to the process. Within seconds, I was wearing dark, practical layers, blending instantly into the backdrop of a city commuter. Amelia tossed the rental van keys into a nearby storm drain. She drove us across the city in a stolen utility vehicle, navigating with a frightening familiarity until we reached a massive, imposing structure, the Zentralbank building, Austria's central bank. "We are not going inside to open the box," Amelia explained grimly as we parked blocks away. "I have the key, but you need to be the one to deliver the leverage. The investigators, Vance and Sterling, they need proof of Vector's true nature to protect Michael from being completely erased. They are the only ones with the authority to grant him immunity from the heavy charges. My role, it turned out, was to be the delivery mechanism for the truth that Michael had secured with his own freedom. Amelia had retrieved the hard drive from the safety deposit box, a small metallic object no bigger than my palm, just minutes before the Vector cleanup team reached the bank. They'll be monitoring every official channel, Amelia stated, handing me a highly encrypted, untraceable flash drive containing copies of the ledger data. You have to walk into the office of the Internal Service, Sarah. You have to hand this to Vance. He'll recognize the encryption signature matching the fragments Michael shared. It was insane. I was walking back into the courtroom, but this time I held the weapon. We managed to slip into the government services complex through a service entrance Amelia seemed to know intimately. We moved like shadows, Amelia's knowledge of the building's schematics proving invaluable. We reached the floor housing the investigative services, the very wing where Michael had been interrogated. "Once you hand this over," Amelia whispered, pushing me toward a guarded corridor, "you disappear. I've arranged a safe route out of Europe for you. You let the official channels handle Michael. If you stay connected to him now, Vector will use you to get to him, or use him to get to you." I stood outside Vance's heavy oak door, the flash drive burning a hole through my pocket. I had my proof. I could save myself from the charge of complicity by exposing the true enemy. I knocked once, sharply. The door opened almost instantly. It wasn't Vance. It was Director Sterling, looking grave, flanked by two men in crisp official uniforms who were definitely not local police. Sterling looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes flicked to the empty hallway behind me. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, his voice measured, "we have been expecting you. Counsel Vance is currently unavailable. Please, come in. We need to discuss the matter of Mr. Harrison's real security arrangements." He stepped aside, revealing an office that was entirely dark, save for a single desk lamp illuminating a table covered not with files, but with satellite communication equipment and maps crisscrossed with red danger zones. Sterling didn't look like an accountant anymore. He looked like a seasoned intelligence operative. "Your husband anticipated Vector would move quickly to silence any outside connection," Sterling continued softly, ushering me into the room. "He was right. They knew about Amelia Reyes. And they knew about the burner phone you were instructed not to use. He anticipated you would come here, but he also anticipated that we would anticipate that. You see, Mrs. Harrison, the investigators are not simply trying to mitigate the fallout of a financial scandal. We are an off-the-books agency tasked with monitoring the infiltration of transnational threats. Michael Harrison wasn't just a criminal. He was our deep-cover operative embedded within Vector's financial structure. And now he's compromised." Sterling pointed to the equipment. "You've brought us the ledger, Sarah. Good. But you've also just walked directly into a secure operational hub. Your escape route has just been activated. We're not letting you go back to paradise. We're activating your new assignment." He leaned across the desk, his eyes sharp and compelling. "Welcome to the fight, Mrs. Harrison. Your honeymoon is officially over, but your real life is just beginning."